Hi everyone, how's everyone doing? I'm Terence McFarland. I am CEO of LA Stage Alliance, and welcome to LA Stage Talks. How's my volume in the back? Good. All right? Yeah. Great. Awesome. Tonight's LA Stage Talk is What Am I Hearing? The Oral Life of the Theater. Sure. Your check is coming. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. How many of you, is this your first time at an LA Stage Talk? Wow, that's fantastic. Awesome, I'm so excited. So here's how LA Stage Talks came about. LA Stage Alliance, for those of you who may not know, is the arts service organization. We're the largest performing arts service organization in the region. We are dedicated to building awareness, appreciation, and support for the performing arts, and we work with about 1,000 different arts groups throughout the region each year in a number of different programs, the Ovation Awards, LA Stage Ticks, many other things. But LA Stage Talks was our attempt to do two things simultaneously. One, for our Ovation voters. How many Ovation voters in the house? Any? Two. One and a reluctant hand. So our Ovation voters vote on productions throughout the year. And so you see the camera here, and we're documenting tonight's process. One of the things we wanted to do was to help educate voters to know a little bit more about the process. The artists and craftspeople that we got on the stage tonight. And the second part was to open up the process, what happens behind the scenes in putting together a theater production, and to invite audiences from around the region into that process. And ideally, the LA Stage Talk series was set up to be not specific to a certain theater, but to really kind of talk broadly about the field and things that we could do as a service organization that perhaps one theater might not do. Most theaters will do like a post-show talk back with the artist with just that production. We wanted to kind of open up the series to a broader conversation that we could do as a service organization. We couldn't do that without our sponsors, so I need to thank them. The Schubert Foundation, the California Community Foundation, LA County Arts Commission, the Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, California Arts Council, and James Irvine Foundation all support our ongoing programs and services. Many other supporters in the mix, but those support our ongoing programs, of which LA Stage Talks is one. I want to thank Baker's Man Productions for documenting tonight's event and being a strong partner with us throughout the year in terms of video documentation. With that, I'm going to start LA Stage Talks. How about that? Sounds good? So we had a few pre-conversations to set tonight up. But to start, might each of you introduce yourselves and tell us what it is that you do in the theater, in the creation of theater making.
All right.
Here.
I'm Drew Dalzell. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm a sound designer, and that's an excellent question. What do I do? I'm not even sure all sound designers can answer that. But essentially, if you hear it in a theater, a sound designer on most shows is in some way involved with it. How's that for an unbelievably vague answer? It means that on some shows, I may be responsible for designing the electronic system that puts all that sound out to the audience. It may be in a musical, dealing with all the wireless microphones and a mix position and all of those. In a dramatic play, it may be building all of the sound effects that you hear. That's all another piece of my job. It may be working with music directors and composers and all those things to make sure that all of these pieces come together. And that's why I kind of say it's, if you hear it in a theater and you see a sound designer credit in the show, they had something to do with each piece of that. It may be as simple as discussions with a composer or a music director to pull out that piece of it. It may be someone who just sent in music files and we then figure out how to make it work in a show. It varies a lot. But that's kind of the nutshell version of what I do as a sound designer. And it's why I love it, because I never quite know what I'm walking into. And I do that, I have that fun left brain, right brain split where dealing with all of the properties of how do I get these complex electrical systems to do something artistic, that to me is a great game and a great puzzle to solve. But then I also love just the pure art of sitting down with a creative staff and design staff and figuring out how can I help the show? How can I do something aurally that may add to the subtext of the show, or may help guide the audience, or may help do those things? And that is a wonderful piece, and that's I guess that's my nutshell of what a sound designer does. I don't know that any sound designer can necessarily answer once and for all what that job really is. It's a tricky question.
Hello, my name is Darryl Archibald. I am a musical director conductor, and again, that's another one of those murky areas. But a good musical director is someone from the very beginning of the process, from auditions. We, along with the director and the choreographer, if there's a choreographer involved with the show, we help choose the people you'll see on stage. And we choose them in many different ways, from the voice qualities to we collaborate with the directors to figure out whether or not this particular person fits the type of character that they're looking for. And so we try to do both things at the same time. Get the person who can sing the role and act the role and who can physically look the part. And from there, then we go into the rehearsal process. We teach all of the music. We help the singers, again, a good musical director will take the direction part of that seriously and help the singer interpret the song and figure out the arc of the music, where it fits in the story, not just say, these are your notes, go, which does happen. And then when we get into the theater, we deal with sound designers and the technicians and different people to try to make the sound of the show sound the best that it can. We communicate what we need and what's realistic, which isn't always the same thing. And as far as if there's orchestra involved with the show, or if it's just a small band, we rehearse those musicians. We basically help them interpret the music as well. Again, a good musical director, a good conductor, doesn't just stand there and say, hey, let's go, and great, that sounds wonderful. You simply, you usually will try to go piece by piece and let everybody know exactly what your idea of the show is, okay? There are cast recordings, but that's great, that was a cast recording, this is how we're doing it. It's not going to be the same as a cast recording, because if you want it the same as a cast recording, go listen to the cast recording. And then from there, we go to opening, and hopefully we get great reviews. But usually, I have to say, musical directors don't get reviewed. They are hardly ever mentioned, and that's okay, because if the show does well, if the audience loves the show, if the reviewer says that the performer or the music sounded great, I have to say at this point in my career, I don't care if my name's not mentioned. Early on, it was like, hey, there's nothing in the show but music, and my name wasn't mentioned. Now, I understand there's only so much space for print, and so somebody's name has to go to the wayside, and usually it's the musical director. So
Except for tonight.
Yes, except for tonight. So that's what I do.
Hi, I'm John Ballinger, and these two started off saying that the word murky was used, and not sure, but they sounded really clear to me. And now it's murky. This is really murky, because right now I'm the musical director and playing in a band for a rock musical. Early in the year I was just a straight sound designer. Last year I did a lot of composing for theater and was the sound designer. I don't know what I do. I mean, all of the things that he said are absolutely right about a musical director, from the beginning of audition, from talking to a producer, going through all the auditions. The only thing about Drew is right. Everything that you hear is touched by the sound designer. For me, when I'm a sound designer, you're hearing what the director wants. For me as a composer, you're hearing what the sound designer decides sometimes that you're going to hear. But most of the time, the process is very collaborative, and you hand files to a sound designer, and they'll just implement it. And as an arranger, you hear what the musical director decides in large part. That's another thing I've done 3 times last year, was the orchestrator for musicals. and you hand in your sheet music to the musical director, and oftentimes what you hand in gets played, and sometimes it doesn't. And that's collaborative too, because the musical director gets to make decisions about everything. And as a musician, you're always hearing from the soundboard operator to turn it down.
We try not to always do that.
And I'm being a little bit humorous because you have to, because it can get pretty hectic with the things that we do, and we have to maintain a sense of humor about that. But
We have to make a lot of people happy.
we have to make a lot of people happy. Yeah. So that's I'm kind of I guess I'm like the Swiss Army knife, or Jack of all trades, master of none, or something like that. But I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So on that tip, we often know that resources are typically limited. There's not always money falling from the sky for all productions. I heard you guys talking about one in particular where money fell from the sky, and we might get into that in a minute. But what are the common slashes or hyphenates that happen in theatrical production? Designer, composer. Some of you, I mean, you're probably the sort of poster child for that. But what are some common combination of roles that we see happening in theatrical production, specifically in LA?
Okay, I guess I'll start. You do see a lot of designer-composer. That's someone that writes music and is also a sound designer. You also see a lot of designer-engineer, and that's probably one of the things that people confuse the most. The person standing back at the console on a musical mixing the show isn't the sound designer. That's the sound engineer. And they're working with the sound designer. Now there are cases where that's a hyphenate, that the sound designer is also the engineer. So that's another combination you see quite a bit. And I joke that you see designer composers and composer designers, because people tend to come from one camp or the other and then also do the other job. I can compose, I very rarely do it, and I try never to tell people that because I'm not comfortable doing it. So I'm a designer who, way back in the parentheses, will compose if there's a gun held to my head. But then I see a lot of the opposite, where I see composers that are brilliant composers and that can design when they need to, but then a lot of times they get caught in the corner of, but then I also need to design the whole sound system to do this. And that can be tricky. And that's where I say it gets gray, because it's like, well, is the sound designer the person that makes all the cues? Or is it the person that puts together the system? And in some theaters you walk into them, and like in this space, there's a system here. You can bring up the faders and go. In others you walk in and it's an empty room. So your first job is going to be, okay, great, what are we renting? And then how do all those things go together? And then how do you make all that work and troubleshoot it and do all that? So for me, those are the common hyphenates I see.
And that last bit, I think, if I could just jump in,
Yeah.
that's where you really do require either a lot of experience or real training in terms of the size of rooms, where to put the speakers. That's stuff that I usually, as a composer / designer, I like to walk into a building with the speakers are already there. It's an expertise that if you're not trained to do, you can run into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And you do find composer, arranger / conductor musical directors in yes, exactly. I've arranged and composed for some of the theater pieces that I've done, but I think a lot of times if you have a composer who is also the musical director and the conductor of his own work, that sometimes is problematic, because sometimes you need another ear there to help you, to help guide you through that and help edit, so to speak. It's like, I would say, a director who is directing his own work that he wrote and produced and cast and did all these things. You need somebody there to kind of edit or sometimes help you interpret something and generally make it better than...
And stars in. You forgot.
And sometimes stars in. Never happens. That never happens.
Yeah, so you worked on that too?
But I think that having other people help interpret your work usually makes it better. Not always, but usually makes it better.
Sure. So now let's flip the coin. So resources are falling from the sky, and there's a fully staffed artistic, creative team and technical craftsperson, engineer team. What are all the players? Who are all the players in a fully fleshed out Aural experience?
On the sound design end, if I'm doing a big musical and I get everything I want, I have a designer, an assistant designer, a programmer, an A1 who's my front of house engineer, an A2 who's a monitor engineer, an A3 who's just dealing with wireless microphones, and an A4 who's utility dealing with everything else. And on big shows, when you imagine shows that have 50 cast members in wireless, that if you've got 3 people working frantically, it can take an hour to get them all into mics. So it starts to ramp up really quickly. And then if you're on a road show, well then add to that, you hit the theater at 6 a.m. and you have a show at 8 p.m. So you've got to have the team to put all of that in. And in those cases, you're not dealing with a house system. You're backing an 18-wheeler up to a loading dock and walking into an empty house and putting it all in from the get-go, while everybody else is also putting everything in they need. So that's just the sound design end of it if I have everything. And then depending, there may be 2 or 3 assistants. In big houses, like if you're doing Cirque du Soleil, Ka, or something like that, you'll have the lead sound designer and then a sound designer programming and dealing with the audio for each section of the audience. Because, for example, on those big systems, there are more speakers than there are seats in the audience. By a factor of about 4. And for example, in Love, there's a stereo pair in front of you and a speaker behind you for every single seat. And then the whole main PA. So you've got assistants working each section to figure out how to make that section work. So it can balloon pretty quickly. Yeah.
And that's a lot of money falling from the sky.
Those are the big, and consider,
Unlimited resources,
yeah, and Cirque's a good example because they rehearse with full tech for 6 months.
Yeah.
Which, in LA, we rehearse with full tech for a week on most shows.
Right.
So.
And as far as on the musical side, on a big show, bigger shows that I've worked on, you start out with a music supervisor, who a lot of times, I've been a music supervisor, it's a great job. You just kind of sit there and listen and say, I don't like the way that sounds. And then other people take care of it. Seriously. Yes, it's a great gig. So you have the music supervisor, you usually have the assistant to the music supervisor, you have a musical director, you have an associate musical director, you have rehearsal pianists. And they're not all necessarily all the same thing. When I do a bigger show, and I'm the musical director or music supervisor, I will not generally even touch the piano for most of the time that I'm there. You have rehearsal accompanists for that. And so you have your rehearsal accompanist, and you have usually the writer, the composer. Okay, he usually has an assistant, which he'll jot down notes if you want to change something. Usually you tell the assistant, this is what I want done, and the assistant says, they told me I need to do this, and he says, sure, fine, change it. Then from there you have the copyists, and these are the people who prepare the music, the sheet music that all of the musicians and everybody reads from. And a lot of times, especially in a new show, things can change hourly. You can be in a rehearsal with the choreographer, and he says, well, the dance is too short. It's 10 minutes long, but the dance is too short. We need more bars for this. I need to put in this flip. And so you go to the composer, say, this is what we need, and they say, repeat these bars, and add the horns here, and then the copyist does all that for you, and then boom, you have the sheet music. And so after the copyists, then you basically have goes down the level to interns and other assistants and things like that, but just a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. And here in LA, a lot of times you have just 2 people, the musical director and usually an assistant or an associate doing all of that. So, but if you have a big budget, it's great.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was just said. And sometimes when you're doing the thing by yourself, when you're doing all those things by yourself musically, it sounds silly, but what you want is someone to bring you a cup of coffee. you know that feeling you just dined. You need a cup of coffee and you cannot go get one. So interns would be really nice. But I agree. Anything to make it to where I'm not a hyphenate 3 times or 4 times would be really grateful for. So please. Make that happen.
Okay.
The problem is then on those shows you also usually get like 4 or 5 directors too.
Right.
That's where
Yeah, that's a lot of coincidence.
Who am I answering to? The producer, the creative director, the artistic director, the director, or the assistant director? Because every other department has as many, on those level shows, every department has something that big. So you walk in and see the creative team, and we need a theater this size for all the creative people to meet. Yeah.
And what I said earlier is true. When you have a choreographer and a director and the producers, on all of these people, those are the people who we are constantly trying to make happy. They all want different things, and usually they're not the same thing. And it makes it very difficult, but somehow it seems to happen. Yeah.
So maybe to follow up on that, can you talk a little bit about the collaborative process? Maybe we'll start on, since we've been talking a little bit about musicals, on the drama side. When you're in the room for a straight play, how does your work sort of come together with the other members of the creative team?
For me, that's where I really rely on the director to, and I rely heavily on hearing the play read by the actors. I personally, however detrimental this is to me in my career, I don't enjoy reading scripts. I don't like the way they're laid out. I love to read, I just don't enjoy reading scripts. I do read them, obviously, but I love hearing the actors read it out loud. Somehow, at that point, it comes to life for me. I'm hit emotionally by it in a way that I'm not when I'm just reading it. And that informs my decision about what sound or to use or what piece of music to compose. But that's where I, instead of relying on a book of music, I really rely on my relationship with the director for a straight play.
Okay. Part of it varies a little bit by director to director. And this, I guess, is a little piece of history here, which is sound in theater is one of the youngest disciplines to really be getting a seat at the table. Video is the thing coming up behind us right now, but originally it was the director and the designer designed everything. They were scenic and lights and costumes, and you had these amazing designers at the beginning of the 20th century that did it all. And then it starts to fragment. You've got all these different elements, and sound is the last piece to fragment out of that. It's evident in the fact that even the contract we have with our union, USA, we're the one discipline that isn't required in a Lord House. You can't do a show in a Lord House without a lighting designer. You can do one without a sound designer. So that's kind of where we stand. So that's a little bit of history about where we stand. So it meant that for a long time with directors, that meant that I tended to be late to the table. I'd walk in and, oh, well, here's the scenic design already done, and we've already met with the lighting designer, and the stage manager, can you come and bring up, I've already written this list of sound cues, and here's where we're starting from. Lately, I'd say the past 10 years or so designing, that the tables have been turning, and it's interesting because it's kind of budget driven. Sets can be really expensive. So when you're moving into a small house, well, a good lighting and sound designer may be able to make a bare stage work for that 20-scene play that just got written that's really something that's designed for television, but we're putting on stage. And this, now all of a sudden the sound designer and the lighting designer are going to have to figure out a way to do all that on a unit set. So I'm finding more and more often I'm one of the first designers at the table, having that discussion with the director. And I love that. I'm also an associate artistic director with a local company. So I'm always reading plays and trying to do that. And I love that game of I'll read it and go, oh, here's everything I see in it. And then I sit down with the director and they go, oh, here's everything I see in it. And we look at the two and go, wow, 3 things are the same and that's it. Now where do we go? But that is the creative juices just pumping full tilt. And that's what I love about doing dramas and straight plays. I love doing musical theater. It's close to my heart. I love the challenge of those things. But straight plays, wow! When I sit down with that director that first time, and all we've done, like sometimes the show isn't even cast yet. It's like, oh, okay, what have we got in here? And it's finding what that meat is underneath, and going, oh, well, there's this one character in the show, and her emotional arc goes like this all the way through it. They go, yeah, that's going to be amazing. I go, okay, well, I've got a sound thought that there's a storm going on outside, and that's kind of mentioned by the playwright here. And what if we build that arc into the storm the entire time through the play, and then how do we work around that? And then it's the first time you sit down at the table with all the rest of the design staff. And I distinctly remember years and years ago doing a production of Hamlet, and the costume designer coming in and saying, oh, well, I've designed the costume for Hamlet's ghost, so it's like an onion, and it's all these layers of his life behind. And that, all of a sudden I went, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing sound-wise for whenever the ghost appears. What you hear is this bed of all the battles that the ghost fought. And it came from something the costume designer says in a meeting. And that to me is straight plays in a nutshell. It's that, and then figuring out a way to pull all that off and pull all those threads together and make that happen. It's one of the reasons I love LA theater so much, is because 80% of the stuff I do is a brand new work. And it means that I don't have anything else to go on, I don't have anybody else's touch on it. I'm reading a script that chances are is going to change significantly by opening night. As opposed to, here's the script with all the notes from the 50 productions that have come before me in it, and now what new thing am I going to do on that, or am I doing our town the same way everybody's always done our town? And that's why LA is, I work in LA and live in LA and do sound, don't go near film, and love doing theater, you know. So that's my collaborative. Sorry.
No, not at all. Let's flip over to the musical side now. So talking about the collaborative process on musicals. Maybe we'll start with
I can take it as an example. The last show that I worked on just recently, Next to Normal, which is a really wonderful show. It's a beautiful show, very heavy show, and the music is integral to the story. There's very little of the show that doesn't have music involved, whether sung or underscored. And basically working with the director Nick DiGrigio and trying to find this balance. The music is kind of rock infused, a lot of it, and it's supposed to be set in basically with this all-American family. And the hard thing about that show, casting it for instance, was that you have this all-American family, but they all have to basically sing like rock stars. And that was the first dilemma that we had, was just casting the show. And then once we found our people, then it was working with the director to basically move through the show and tell the story the way he wanted to tell the story. And again, being a musical director doesn't mean that you just simply sit down and open the score and just do what's written. That may have worked for the production in New York, may have worked for the production that toured, but this is our production, okay? So all of the underscoring or the tempos may not be what they do on the recording or what they did before. It's what we think will tell the story the best. And there was a specific song in the show that was originally done kind of as a ballad. And it comes at a moment in the show where the wife has basically said, why stay? Why are you staying? And the husband in the original production kind of brings it down and he says, I made a promise, okay? The way that I decided to do it, and when I heard this music, I thought it just brings the energy down and it doesn't quite make sense to me. And I went to the director and I said, how about if we did it this way? And it was just, he just tears into the song. It's driven, it's, you know, it's not basically done as a ballad. And he says, I love it. So we tried it, and in my opinion, it worked really well for our production and what we were trying to do. So that's again, I said a real music director, a real good musical director is one who takes the direction part of that phrase seriously and works from a directing standpoint through the music. Just, again, doesn't simply open the score, sit at the piano, or teach notes, but interprets the music, helps tell the story with the music, and so that's how I like to think of it when I collaborate with the director.
Yeah, I think I agree on in terms of musicals. The one I'm working on right now is a jukebox musical with a whole bunch of songs from the British invasion, the early 60s. Kinks, The Who, you know, the animals, the zombies. And you would think, well, we're just going to make these tunes, you know. But as he said, and we had a cast album, which I played on, and this musical doesn't sound like that anymore because we had a different creative team come in. We had a choreographer who served a lot of times as director. We had a director who served a lot of times as a writer. We had a producer who was his first time out, and he's swimming and we're helping him figure out how to stay afloat. And so a lot of changes happened. Things that were very slow in the album are now very fast. And it's like Drew said, I don't think I've worked on anything. I worked on 2 plays in the last 6 years that had been done before. So LA is like that a lot. I don't know what other towns are like because I've never worked in them, but it's always new for me. And every production, yeah, like you said, something that worked in New York or something that worked somewhere else. This is our show now. We have to input, otherwise we're not doing our job.
And also working with the sound designer, again, going back to the last example, Next to Normal. The way the show was originally done, the orchestra, the band was placed inside of the set, so they were kind of enclosed in the set. So sound was a very different issue. But the way that we did it at McCoy Rigby, this band was on stage, basically in the set, all together, upstage of a scrim. And that created a lot of problems because basically the audience is right here, you have a band basically right here playing rock music. So, and
What's
wrong with that?
and on top of that, you have to hear singers. On top of singers. We forgot about the cast. So, I had to work with the sound designer to figure out, okay, how can we still make this sound like a really great rock and roll driven show without basically muting the band totally, because that was on the table because the band was so loud. So we talked about all the options we had. We have the drummer, and so that the drummer could lay in, we had him use what they call these kind of chopsticks that kind of diffuse the sound of the drums.
Multi-rods.
Exactly, multi-rods. He calls them chopsticks, I don't know why. But they look like just a bunch of sticks put together, banded together, and they're not the usual drumstick. We also repositioned the way the guitar was there. We put baffling around all the instruments. We did all kinds of things so that the band could play out, so we could still have a rock feel without basically taking the core of the show away, which is this wonderful rock and roll score. So that's another thing that you collaborate with the sound team to make these things work, so that the experience for the audience is a good one. Because what you don't want is the audience to be sitting there and going, "Gosh, it's great, but it's so loud," or "I can't hear anything that the actors are saying," because that defeats the purpose of the show. We're even putting the show on. If you can't hear the actors, if the sound is deafening and you're not enjoying the show because of that, then it kind of defeats the purpose for you coming to see the show. And then, by extension, we don't sell tickets.
It's interesting. Like I said, I love doing musicals, but it's such a different process. It's still collaborative, but in all kinds of different ways. And I think the way I've summed it up a few times is that when I design a straight play, I joke that I'm paid for what I do. Like, it's really clear, I built 400 sound cues for that play. You can see where it is. In a musical, I'm paid for what I know. That if I'm doing my job right in a musical, it looks like it's a lot easier. Because I get the system in, I get it tuned, I have an engineer that's mixing it, I have music director, there's all these people that are doing their jobs. And I'm kind of out there in the house going, all right. But then what my job really is to talk to everyone. So as a sound designer, I don't like mixing my own shows. I want someone else to be doing that so that I can be in the house listening. So when I hear something, I start making the judgments about, all right, so we can't hear the vocal right here. So do I need to get my engineer to bring that mic up? Or do I need to talk to the director and the music director about getting that cast member to sing out? Or do I need to go and talk to the music director and the arranger about maybe getting the really heavy strings in that section trimmed out a bit? Because when you think about what vocal chords are, they're a set of strings. And a heavy string section on top of vocals is occupying the exact same sonic space. You listen to an old Rodgers and Hart or Rodgers and Hammerstein arrangement, and amazing, the moment those big vocals come in, all these other parts of the arrangements go away, and they make a pocket for where the voice is. And a big part of that is because those were all written before we had huge sound reinforcement systems. Then you listen to a modern Sondheim show, and it's written knowing that we can amplify these voices. So there's this wall of sound that you're up against, and then you've got to find a way to get the vocal in front of it. So for me on a musical, it's all about making all those little negotiations with people. And it's very little, I try to make the last thing I do is go up to my engineer and have them change something. Because that is usually not the right answer. The right answer is usually, all right, what do I need to do with the band? What do I need to do with this? And like both of these gentlemen have said, trying to please everyone. Because you hear sound designers all the time, oh, we got to get the band to play quieter, we got to get the band to play quieter. And you know what you end up doing is you suck the heart out of the music. It's so hard to get a group of musicians to play together earnestly as a combo when they're all trying to hold way back. It's deadly. So I've got to let them have enough energy to stay together as a combo, but then still be manageable so I can keep them balanced with the voices. And then deal with the cast of 5 people that sing out and one person is projecting about this one. And I don't have a mic on and people can hear me here. And I've done far too many shows where a lead singing at the top of their lungs without a mic is projecting about this much. And the reality is, if the front row can't hear me without a mic, the PA can't do anything to help you. So it's how do you master all of those things, and I love that piece of it. That okay, so go down to the pit rail and talk to the conductor, and then go over to the director and talk about, can we restage this a little bit? Can you please not do this entire scene with the lead facing upstage? I understand that it looks great and is doing that, but all we're hearing is the PA at that point, and the whole PA is designed so that it assists a live voice. And when you turn the live voice like this, well, that takes a big piece of that away. So that's the collaborative process for me on a musical, is that it's all in the space and managing, and I try not to touch the board and not to touch the computer, and I want to be the trained ears. I want the music director to be able to come to me and go, hey, I've been stuck playing double duty and I'm conducting. What does it sound like in the house?
And that's important because this relationship with sound designer and the engineer, the board operator, it's the most important relationship. If you don't have a good relationship with your sound designer and your board operator, I hate to say it, you're screwed. Because you have to trust, especially if and the shows are coming out this way a lot now, you're a playing conductor, where you can't get up from the piano and go out and listen. Most of the shows are coming out this way now. The older shows, I could hop over the pit, start the orchestra, go out and listen. It's like, oh yeah, that sounds great, thanks a lot. But now you're stuck at the piano. So you have to trust someone else to basically take what you've worked on in all of your rehearsals and convey that to the audience.
And it means that even though I'm not a musician, I know how to read music, I understand what's going on, I do all that, because I need to be able to go to a music director and say, okay, here's what's going on. In this section, this is sounding great, this is sounding great. When you pull back, well, the one thing you'd never hear, I can't hear the horn section. But when things pull back, I'm really having problems picking the cello out. And sometimes the music director goes, oh, well, yeah, I have them pulling back there. Great, let me, and it's that type of thing. But a lot of times the discussion happens with, oh no, things sound fine out there. I can hear the vocal. Well, that's not giving you any information.
Exactly.
So I want to be able to come back and say, no, in this section, when we get here, when the patter starts up, I need the orchestra to do this so I can get the vocals to be understood when it's a quick spoken pattern. But then you can really let loose here, so we punch through to the end of the number. And oh, at the end of the number, it'd be really great if we hear a big zip from the horn section. It's those types of things. So I love music directors that can speak my language, but it means that I also need to do everything I can do to speak their language. That to me is, again, I love working with people, and that's, I see a lot of young sound designers, like they'll hear something and they immediately run to the console because the engineer is the other person that talks their language. And a knob on a console isn't intimidating. And it's honest, when you're starting as a sound designer, the most intimidating person in the room is the conductor or the music director. and it's because you're sitting there and like, you can put this whole thing together, but then I step back and I go, holy crap, they can manage all these musicians and be reorchestrating all this, and they've done how much music training to get to where they're at, and it always feels like they've done a million more shows than any of us have. And then you realize later on that that's everyone in the room is probably having that feeling. But when you're starting, it's like, and it's also because when you're a young designer, the music director is probably the one person that can call you out as a fool, because they know enough about what you're doing that if they come back and they go, yeah, no, this sounds like hell and it's their fault. You hope you never get in that situation, but that's, when it works, it's so great, because it is a relationship of trust and doing all that thing, but getting there is, it's dicey waters to navigate sometimes.
And I have had that experience before, and it's at an out-of-town theater where I trusted a sound, not the sound designer, the sound engineer. The sound designer had left town. And the sound engineer decided that he would tweak things, and I actually, my assistant came and was ready to conduct, so they conducted, and I was not on the schedule. I went out in the house and listened, and I was mortified. And it was really an ear-opening experience for me to go out and listen and think, this is not what I heard during tech, And so I went to the board operator and said, what happened? And because somebody had come up to them and said something, they decided to change things. An audience member came up and said something specific to them, and they decided to change what they were doing at the board. And needless to say, I went to the producers, and that board operator was no longer there. No, I gave them a choice. It was either me or the board operator. And I hated to do that.
Choice, and
I hated to do that. But that, again, it's a trust situation. And if something's going to change, if I'm going to change something in the band, I'm going to tell sound. If an understudy is going on, we're going to tell sound that an understudy is going on. We don't wait until, well, we can't because they have to put the mics on them, but we can't wait until, the last minute to tell sound that something different is happening.
So
and we expect the same thing.
You wouldn't surprise me with an electric viola when we have a regular one?
No.
Not that that's ever happened. Why is this they've got an electric viola today? Who even has that?
But that's what I mean. It's really a trust relationship, because I'm relying on somebody else to basically take all of the work that I've done and give it to the audience. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there are theaters that the orchestra the pit is too low or the pit is hidden, so it's all about sound. You're not really getting any ambient sound. So everything is up to the designer and to the person back at that board. And so a lot of times audiences will say, gosh, that show just sounded so awful. I don't know what was the matter with the orchestra, the band, or blah, 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 blah. And sometimes it really is the orchestra, but sometimes it's sound. It's just, unfortunately, it's hard to, in certain cases, to delineate which is the culprit.
It's also tricky. Part of my other work is I do a lot of theme park work, which is kind of the epitome of corporate everything. And as much as we don't like to admit it, there are some of those decisions that get made, and it's tough because you get feedback, and everybody wants to drive everything from feedback, and it's like, well, okay, so yeah, I understand the show didn't sound perfect. The house manager, where were they sitting? Because as a designer in like a 2,000-seat house, I'm walking as much as I can, and there's obstructed view seats. Unfortunately, there's usually a few obstructed audio seats. Only no one will ever say, oh, this is a bad sound seat. A bad view seat is easy. Oh, look, there's a pillar. But and sometimes it is. It's like, oh, I've got 2,000 seats, and really to cover these 15 over here and these 15 over here that are going to be problem seats, you're going to have to double your sound budget to pull that off. And the producers will sit there and go, well, that's not going to happen. We'll deal with 30 bad seats. So it's tricky because, like, did that sound engineer, were they dumb enough to take a note from someone who was sitting in a bad seat and then adjust the mix for all that? And the other thing to think is like, well, why don't they mix so it sounds good where they are? Well, because usually the mix position is one of the worst sounding places in the house, because the producers don't want to sell those seats, so that's where you put the mix position. Or it's like in this case, well, I mean, I don't know if they can take seats out in this house to put a mix in, but if you were doing a small musical in here, they may well be mixing it from up in the booth. Well, nobody sits in the booth. You know, so it's, but again, it's that decision, well, do we lose 5 seats in the back row to give someone a place to mix? And even then, that back row is underneath a lip and tucked, and are they covered? And so a good, that's why I say I have to be the ears in the house, because not only that, I'm walking back to my engineer and saying, okay, you need to mix it so it sounds wrong to you, but so that it sounds consistently wrong the same way every night. Because if it sounds wrong to you where you're mixing from, it sounds perfect for 98% of the house. Yeah, a good engineer is worth their weight in gold.
It's an enormously powerful position, a sound engineer, sound designer, for a production, and it's an enormously human thing, just like our craft. We can't make it perfect for every audience member every night. We just can't do, nobody can do that. It's not a movie, you know? And it's we really have to get along. We really, some of the most responsible people you'll ever meet are artists, because we must get along. There aren't that many, you know, you can't fire people at a moment's notice like you can in the corporate world. You can't just drop people at a drop of a hat. You have to find a way to relate.
And to give a perspective on what that engineer, what a good engineer is doing, Broadway style mixing is called line by line mixing, which means you have 20 people in your cast. There are 20 faders for those people. Only when someone is speaking is their fader up. So a performer memorizes all of their lines and the cue lines that feed them and the cue lines that trigger someone else. An engineer knows every single line and nuance of performance that every single person on stage does night after night.
Plus the band.
Plus the band. So like on a musical, it's that thing where you hear that great thing and there's a melodic line that goes oboe to flute to guitar to this. Well, they're playing that out to some degree in the pit, but you've also got an engineer that's chasing that through the mix. At the same time, they're trying to pick out the 2 leads that are singing, who are the love interests, so of course they're each wearing a mic right here, singing at the top of their lungs, and then they lean into each other. Which means we've EQ'd this mic to sound great when it's off access from this performer's mouth, and now I've got that performer singing straight into it. And so you do that by literally line by line in that section, ducking the right mic, so that you don't get that, and doing all that as transparently as possible. So that person, they're doing as much work as any lead in any show is. And you know, if you'll look back at a lot of them, when I mix, I sub occasionally for my engineers, and they have a well marked up book, and I never look at the stage. I'm mixing it line by line with my eyes glued to the script. But again, it's a game of what happens when a performer on stage one night decides to punch that line a bit. But it's not even riff, it's like, as opposed to delivering the line this way, I deliver the line this way. Well, I set my, I'm expecting it to be down here, and I do that, and all of a sudden it's BAM! And it sounds like the engineer did something horribly wrong. Well, they may not have. So it's one of those, I don't mix often, but it's a fun ride when you do, because you walk away on this huge adrenaline high, because you've just pulled this off. And the people I have friends that mixed Cats in New York for years, and they can sing the opening song to Cats by calling out the numbers of the faders that we're bringing up. It's like 4 4 4 4 5 4 4 4 3 2, and it's just it's mixing by the numbers, and I don't care who it is. I know that it's DCA 1, DCA, it's boom 3, but that's what you're doing. There's this idea that well, you just bring the mics up. If they're on stage, their mics up. No, if they're on stage and saying a line, their mic's up. As soon as they're done with that line, their mic's out. Yeah.
And since you mentioned Cats, there's another collaboration that I have to mention, and that's with choreographers. Mm-hmm. Any choreographers or dancers out there before I do this? No, because the one thing you, as a musical director, that you dread is the production number that everybody is supposed to sing while they're dancing. So that's also a collaborative process. when I finished doing the tour of Memphis, which Sergio Trujillo did, and the people were, being thrown in the air, people flipped upside down, and so we're in rehearsal, they're all sitting in their chairs, we sing through all the numbers, everything sounds glorious, it's wonderful, and then they learn the choreography, we run the number, I can't hear a thing. And the poor sopranos are coming, they're like, I can't sing that high A. I mean, he's holding me, upside down, and it's just hard to sing that way. I'm like, that's fun, you don't have to sing it. But that's another thing that musical directors have to deal with and sound designers. Because I'm screaming, I can't hear any of the sopranos, and they're like, well, are they singing? And they tell me they're singing. Well, I go to the people, yeah, I'm singing, but I'm being held upside down, or I'm being thrown up in the air 20 feet at the time I'm supposed to be singing that high A. So there's only so much that I can do. Or we're running around the stage, 30 times, so we're all out of breath, and so I'm like, sound, what can you do about that?
And what the engineer's trying to do is wait till the last possible second to crack open that mic, so that you don't get that right before the sung line. You're trying to let them catch their breath, and then you're catching them right on that beginning of that note. So boom, you get them right in there. And then keep in mind, you do something like Dames at Sea. Well, that big tap number, we're also miking the taps. So on top of vocal and everything else, we may have mics running down to the ends of their pant legs, so we're picking that up, or mics hidden in the set, so that you get that click of the taps all the way through things.
Because that's a sign of the times. In the old days, there was a singing chorus and a dancing chorus. As budgets got smaller, there's now a singing dancing chorus, an acting chorus. They do everything.
Triple threats?
Exactly. I long for the days of the singing chorus and the dancing chorus, because it does make it difficult, because you'll have a producer come up to you and say, gosh, that number, it's not sounding very good. And I'm thinking, everybody's like twirling around for 10 minutes and they can't sing. If you can give me an offstage chorus, perhaps, not going to happen. So that's a whole nother area that we get into is the dilemma of sound with movement.
And the other, since you brought up budgets, the other thing that impacts is the day of the 20 or 30 piece band is gone, which means that you've got most musicians in the pit doubling or tripling on instruments. Which that means you've got to get people that can do that. Then you've got to arrange around that limitation. But then it means that, again, back at that mix console, well, when I bring up the fader in this song, it's a flute. And I bring up the same fader 2 songs later, and it's a clarinet. And I bring up the same fader 2 songs later, and it's an oboe. Or I've got 3 mics on one person doing all of those things. Or, well, we've got the piano being played on a piano, and then 2 horns and a string player, and everything else is on keys too.
Yeah.
And so you've got a second sampler that you bring up that fader and you don't know what you're going to get out of it. And then if they don't have a good synth programmer and they haven't, all the different instruments that are played out of a piano are called patches. And you would think that hitting the key at the same velocity with 2 different patches, you'd get the same sound level out. It doesn't work that way. You play it once and it's the banjo patch, and it's at some notch just underneath ear bleed. And then you play the next one and it's the flute patch, and it's way down here and barely registering. So you're trying to mix this thing and the same instrument, and they're changing patches as the song is going on to nail all these things. It's like, oh, what is going on with this? So it's and again, that's another negotiation where, okay, I've got a list of patches that we need to get leveled.
And meanwhile, you're asking the sound designer to make it sound like it's not a keyboard. Exactly. Can you please bring up the one violin that's in the pit as opposed to the keyboard that's playing the full symphony string section, and make that sound like it's one wonderful luscious group of live strings. So yes.
Yeah.
The other aspect of collaboration that we haven't talked about yet is the collaboration between unions. Or if you're a producer and you want an offstage chorus, you're going to run into problems unless you're going to have to pay those actors extra, even though they're sitting off stage waiting to go on and they don't have anything to do. They can't sing off stage if they're in the union, unless you want to pay them extra, which they deserve. I don't have a problem with that, but there's a lot of there's a lot of that too.
It's a lot of, I just had a show extend for an extra month, and we had 3 tracked parts of the show, recorded parts, using members of the cast. Well, 2 of those cast members swapped out for the extension, which meant we needed to then go back and re-record those parts. Because even though they were a chorus part in the background of a radio cue that plays on stage, and there's no way anybody could ever tell that it's a different actor, no, that if we're gonna use their voice, we need to pay them. And which they have every right to, but again, it's a logistical thing of, oh, we're doing the extension, that starts in a week. Now we've got to go back to the studio to re-record cues that we did 3 months ago.
And then you have to collaborate with lawyers too if you're doing a jukebox musical, because they're going to be the ones that are going to help you get the rights to those songs. One musical I very recently worked on has an opening number that is not usable. But we've been granted time to write something else. Meanwhile, so these are probably, if you don't have a good legal team, or if you've got legal teams that are busy with other things, there's a lot of collaboration with lots of different people.
Staying on the technical side, and you guys have touched on this a little bit, but can you share an anecdote of a show that was either a tremendous success from a technical point of view or a horrific failure? and we can say the name. You can not say the names, right? Let's protect the innocent.
What was that word you used after tremendous? Was it success?
It was success.
Oh.
Yes, a tremendous success and or a horrific failure.
From what standpoint? From the
sort of the oral experience, the experience as the people involved in the production, or from an audience perspective, perhaps.
Okay.
Any of the above.
All right. Yes, there was a show that I was hired to be the musical director for, and this goes back to collaboration, and it seemed like a wonderful show. I listened to it was an original show, a new show. I listened to the music, lovely music. I met with the composer, at the time seemed like a lovely person. And we get into rehearsals, and it became clear that the composer was a little off balance. And so what would happen is that this person, I won't even say whether it's a male or female, because the show did go on, would come into the rehearsals and say, oh my gosh, I have this great idea for a song. I'm like, great, give me the music. I'm teaching this music right here to the cast. No, this I can just sing it to you right now, and then we can teach the cast the song. So I would sit there and I'm like, okay, blah, 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 go ahead. So this person would start singing, this is how it goes, la da 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 da, and the sopranos will go da 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 da, and then the altos would do this, and I'm like, are there lyrics to this song? Oh yeah, and the lyrics are, you'll do this, no, well I'm not sure about the lyrics yet. 20 minutes into this, I thought, okay, so I went to the producers and I said, this can't happen, so they talked to the composer, 2 days, fine, then this happened again, and I had the composer banned from rehearsal. And then the final straw, the composer, after being banned from the rehearsal, met me outside by the car, sobbing. Well, I don't understand, why did you have me banned from rehearsal? I'm just trying to help my show, I'm just trying to... And with that, I went to the producers and said, you need to find somebody else. Here's all of your money back. And I released myself from the show because I knew it was going to be a disaster, which it was, and that it was not worth any amount of money, which they offered me more money to stay, but it was not worth any amount of money to actually stay and deal with that sort of, aggravation. So, yes. So sometimes collaboration is not a good thing.
And the joke I made at the beginning about what does a sound designer actually do? I've run into that years ago. I did a show where it was a director who was a very sweet woman. It was great to work with, but she really kind of had no concept of how a sound designer plugged into the show. And it was a show about kind of alternative rock music. And so I'm working on the sound design, and then random musicians kept turning up. And it was basically, oh, this is my friend who's in a band, and they're going to play for these 3 nights of the show. And I'm like, well, okay, but that's one, that's kind of, and then like another one would come in with a whole bunch of sound cues. Be like, well, that's kind of my job, not theirs. And your unemployed bassist friend isn't doing very good sound cues. So how about we just, and it honestly got to the point where I had to go to the producers and say, you know, we're a week away from opening and you need to take my name out of the program. Because what's on stage isn't my work. And it took that to finally, and at that point, the producer stepped in and took over directing from the director, so that was the final straw on how out of control this show was. But it was a case in that point of someone who just really, it wasn't coming from a mean place, it wasn't coming from a hurtful place, she just really had no clue what different members of her creative team were supposed to be doing. And she thought, oh, this would just be so fun that I've got friends in a band here, and she wanted to direct the show because she was so into the music. And so then she thought it was a great opportunity for all her friends who are musicians to come in and do it too. And it's like, well, that's really going to screw with your cast if one night you've got a reggae band and the next night, and I'm not joking, this is what it was, oh, it's this great reggae band, and the next night was like a metal band, and it's like, you know, how does, and it was just like, I think in her mind it was like going to a bar and hanging out here, and it's like, but there's a show here with a script. And it's unfortunate. Sometimes it gets that far, and for me, I will step to the point where I protect myself, and sometimes you have to walk out of the show, and you hate to do that. Or I've had a handful of shows that I've designed, and my name's not on them.
I've been there.
And it's an awkward position to go to a producer and say, you need to take my name off this. I've been put in a position where I'm not going to stop your show from opening, but I can't afford to have my name on it. You know, and that's tough, because ultimately I'm judged by, you know, those things. If someone goes and sees a show and it's like, why in the world would someone, Drew Dalzell? Yeah, you know, done and done. So, you know, those things, ugh, yeah.
It's kind of like the news, I guess. It's easier to talk about the ones that were bad. It's a lot more fun for me to talk about the ones that were bad. I had my name removed from a program once, and that play went on to win an ovation. When I went back and saw it, after I had, you know, designed it, not designed it, I thought, oh, this thing turned out okay. So that was a point there in that play where the relationship between me as the sound designer and the musical director / composer was not a good one. Well, it was a very difficult relationship. I couldn't get a straight answer. I didn't know what she wanted, so I couldn't implement it. But I have had good experiences too. One of them, I'll tell a good one, and it won't take long because it doesn't take long to tell a good one. Me and a couple of people that might be known here, Laurie Scarlett and Keith Farley, co-book writer of Bat Boy the musical. We wrote a musical and got into the New York Musical Theater Festival. And we thought it was just going to be a zoo, because there's 9 plays going on at once, and they're all full tech. Everyone's in mics. You know, there's a band. There's lights. And New York, at least the stage we were on for this festival, was not like a lot of our LA theaters, where there's backstage space. You know, there's a bathroom. It was very, very tiny. We literally stacked our set stuff on top of each other, like a jigsaw puzzle, like a Rubik's Cube after every night. But the sound, the lights, the execution of it, the team that was there, it was fantastic. And I think I noticed it mostly because I was so surprised. It was so chaotic, but it really turned out well. So you see, it's not that much fun to talk about things else.
It is. You never know where they're going to come from. The one ovation I've won was for a show up at the Rubicon Theater. which is a theater company I love to work with, and it was a great play, and I think almost all the design staff won that year. And that was a great experience, but it's one of those ones where you never know quite where they're going to come from. In the background, what was going on, I won for Best Sound Design. We had four actors, and those are the only things that were mic'd in the whole show. The band was tucked in the corner, and we made the decision to not mic them at all. And the board was the crappiest little board you could buy. And by the time we finished the run, over half of the channels on it had died. We barely had enough to mix the show. And I remember walking in on the first day, one of the speakers was blown. And so like the first thing I had to do in the theater is go, well, we have to replace that speaker. And I guess I'm not going to convince you to buy 4 new speakers because all of them are kind of bad. So buy a new one of these bad ones and we'll put that up. And that's the show, you know, and at that level, at the Rubicon, I'm up against the Taper and all the, I mean, that's the same category. And that's the show that won. So you never know where those, and it turned out to be a great experience. We all won it. It was wonderful. The show did sound great. It was Songs for a New World, and it just, whatever it did, it came together and it worked. And it was, and I can look at it and say, no, we pulled it off. It was a great sounding show. But if anybody in the background knew what was holding that together, it was chewing wire or chewing gum and baling wire, barely. And so yeah, so there are all kinds of wonderful, and that really did come down to Brent Cran was the music director, and working with him, and he made the band sound great. And since it was like piano, bass, and drums, and it was an electric bass, so they were balancing themselves, and that's what I had to do is work with them. And literally my sound design for the band was, hey, in this number you need to get the bassist to turn down his amp a bit, and on this one you can really drive out on the piano, and then the drums can go. So I figured out from the house how to give them the notes, and that's how they played it each night. So you can do it, and those are great experiences.
And I just quickly, something that for me as a musical director makes you feel really good at the end of the day. I did King and I with Debbie Gibson, the pop singer. She played Anna. And when they cast her, I thought, oh, are you kidding? Pop singer? I mean, she's playing, you know. And when she came in, no English accent, the style of the vocals, all wrong. And by the time we got to opening, just from the work that I had done with her and that the director had done with her, and giving her all kinds of exercises for her voice and different things like that, I've done King and I a few times, was the best Anna that I'd ever done the show with. And it's experiences like that where you take something unexpected and turn it into something really wonderful. And because at first I thought, oh, you know, the reviewers, audiences, they're going to crucify her. They loved her. She was simply lovely. And you would have never thought, I mean, this was the first time she'd ever done anything like this. And I was so proud of that. And no one knows what we did behind the scenes. And you know, I don't really care. I just know when I would watch her every night, I would think, gosh, I helped, you know, put that on stage and create what people are seeing. And it doesn't matter if anybody knows about it, I know that I helped do that. And it's moments like that, you're like, okay, it's, you know, it's not so bad. Yeah.
In a moment, I'm going to turn to you and open it up for Q&A, but and as you're thinking of your questions, we posted on social media, on Facebook, and asked for questions from folks who couldn't attend. And John, you touched on this at the top. The question was about inspiration, right? Often with designers, scenic designers or costume designers, you'll see like an idea board of similar styles. And so the question is, in the sonic landscape, in the aural experience, where do you all seek inspiration? We heard, John, from you at the beginning wanting to hear the emotion of the actors, but can you guys maybe talk a little bit more about the inspiration piece and the collaboration and creative process?
Yeah, I think I would just echo that for whether it's a dramatic play or a musical. When I can, or if I'm, especially if I'm a musical director and you're working one-on-one with a singer and you hear them do something and they've done something unexpected, or they've done something beautiful that they didn't know how they did it, and you try to recapture that. for me, it's really is the human element. If I can be one-on-one with somebody, or if I can be, if I can have time to talk to a director, or time to really hear the play read and see it, then I feel like I can be a part of that relationship, and that's the most important thing to me in terms of. So I don't know what the inspiration is a lot, especially for the things that are new. If it's a musical, you're looking at sheet music. If you're making the musical, then your inspiration has come from lots of different places. But for me, it always comes down to, what is this person saying to me? Whether by what they're singing, what they're dancing, what they're reading, the mistake they made, the mistake I made. You know, how is this thing starting to feel like it's alive? And for me, it's always when I'm with other people. It's not before, it's not after. Just an echo, really.
I think for me, I'm trying to always listen to the world around me. And I think it's interesting. It's interesting things that'll trigger it, and I'm always trying to figure out those things that trigger memories. And it's like you'll hear a song on the radio, and immediately it's like, oh, that was high school. Or it's that thing like you'll smell a smell and go, that's summer camp. That's summer camp. That's the type of things that I'm trying to find all the time for me sonically. So it's like, oh, I'm out here and I hear a truck drive by in the rain, and what does that do to me? Because it's that mental Rolodex that I'm always trying to build up, and then that really makes me feel that way. Whenever a sound kind of makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up for one reason or another, if it's in a show or walking down the street or getting off a plane or something like that, I try to make a mental note so that 5 years later or 2 months later or whatever, when a director goes, oh, there's this moment that we really want to nail this way, and it's like, wait a minute, I was getting off a plane flying into Orlando and this happened and that was just the right, and it's what set my teeth on edge, and that's the sound we want. So it's to me, it's being as attuned as I can to the world around me, which is hard. It's hard in LA when it's just a din all the time. Sometimes you want that moment of peace, sometimes you don't. And it's interesting because sometimes that's what the answer is it's finding that moment of peace in a play. You know, it's like, oh, we're gonna have that din all the time, and the one moment when I take all the sound away, that's a bigger statement than any cue I'm ever gonna play. It's where I choose not to play a cue. But that for me is great. The other thing that I love to do is sit down with directors, and we'll meet up in my studio. I have a huge music collection because, well, I do sound, so of course I do. And then with the advent of iTunes and everything, anything you don't already own, you can sample and listen to. And it's nothing that's ever going to turn up in a show, but we'll sit there with the script, and I have a few directors that they'll come in with, when I was reading it, this is the song I was listening to, and this, and I'll go, yeah, this song by the Pogues sounds like the right thing. It's part of the world of this play. And at the end of it, we'll end up with a playlist that none of them will ever turn up in the show, but it's the playlist of the play. And it's like, oh, well, there's a little bit of the Pogues, and a little bit of Tom Waits, and a little bit, and it's like, all of a sudden you start to ID, well, what do those have in common? What does that do? And if I'm working with a composer, it becomes a leaping off point there to go, well, we were everywhere from Depeche Mode to The Clash with a little bit of Schubert thrown in. But this is what we found in between, and then for me, it's that what I'm trying to do there is establish the language. That when I say this, I mean this. So it's like, oh, when I say the music's sharp, not necessarily musically sharp, but it's like it's got an edge to it. And I'll play an example. This is what I mean. And the director goes, oh, well, yeah, I would have said it this way, but I see where you're getting to. So that, to me, those are the great sessions for inspiration. And then just, the same way scenic designers have to have those photo collages and all those things. And you go into a scenic designer's house and they have all these great art books and architecture books. And like, I can't come up with somebody to do that. For me, that's trying to get that mental Rolodex all the time of what made it. I designed a production of Adding Machine way too many years ago, but I remember the transitions coming up, and the thing that jumped in my mind was machines, and a week later I was at Magic Mountain, and it was all the lift hills of the roller coasters going up. And I went back the week after that with a recorder and recorded all of them, and then built that into all the giant gears changing in between the scenes. But it was that knocking around in the back of my head and something totally unrelated and go, gears and chains and machines, and that's it. So you never know where it's gonna hit, but that's, to me, a sound designer has to have this crazy Rolodex of, I've got this sound in the back of my head that does it. So that's my inspiration. I'm not a sound designer.
All right, with that, I'll open it up. Question. Okay, we're gonna go here, here, and then here.
In a straight play, how much input do you expect, in terms of the sonic world, how much input do you expect to find specifically in the script? And when is there too much on the part of the playwright? When is there not enough? And how do you balance what you do, what you add to the play that may not be specifically specified in the script?
Yeah, I think I've had all ends of that spectrum. I've had shows where I look at it and what's written on the page is maybe 2 sound effects in a 90-page script, and I come out with 200 cues in a show. And a lot of that is it's reading between, it's like, okay, the playwright never mentions this, but there's time of day indication, so what do I need to do to help that along? And there's place indication, so what do I need to do to help that along? And I'm also trying to always track emotional arcs in characters. Go, all right, so this character is really going through this. Is there something I can do to help that? You know, they're going to a really dark place here. What can I do to help that? What the thing that I'm looking for a lot of cases, what can I do to make the audience lean in? And that's where I say it's sometimes taking sound away, so you'll do it and I'll slowly pull it back. And if you can get them to lean in, because I want to point in theater, we don't have the tight one shot. I can't force someone to look where I want them to look.
No close-ups.
Yeah, so what do you do to make that happen? And sometimes we can do that with sound. It's like, I really want someone to tune into this. How can I get them right into that? There is just a maniacal glee when you can sit in the back and watch an audience all day and know that you probably caused part of that. Not that there's a power trip involved or anything. So I've had that, and I've also been in the situation where I've had playwrights that have written in every single thing in the show. Sometimes I agree with it, sometimes I fight them on it. I had one playwright years ago that had a great scene, and he had written in, "Right said Fred, I'm so sexy," and he was thrilled that I had that in my sound effects library, and I said, yeah, because it's like the 9th show that's asked for it. Sorry, but he fought me on it, and I lost, and that was what went into the show. And it's tricky. Sometimes you win those fights, sometimes you don't. Hopefully, that's a street that's going to go both ways. What I'm always striving for, especially on a new work, is that I can sit there and go on a playwright and go, from what you wrote here, I understand what you're going for. And while I don't understand, I'm not a wordsmith with the words on the page, I am with the sound that's in this script. So I can make your words even stronger here if you'll let me. And usually that's a really good relationship, and I can do that. And occasionally I get the ones where it's like, no, this show worked this way in 4 theaters, and so I am not veering off the tracks on that. That's my experience there.
Yeah, it like everything else, it varies script to script, you know. But I was just thinking that a show that just closed at the Odyssey was Annapurna with Megan Mullally and Dick Offerman, and they're longtime members of the Evidence Room theater company that I'm also there. So it's great to see them again. But it's a good play, a really good play, and they were pretty good too. They weren't bad at all. There was a thing. The reason I thought it was because there was some very specific dog barking moments in it, and when I was reading it, I thought, okay, so I'll get some dogs, you know. But there was a pretty specific direction there for when the dog snarled, chewing on a bone, and when it stopped. And when I see something like that, you know, I can't really just go, I'm going to get the dog barking, you know. That's really specific. That's like a choreographic moment there. So I followed it I generally, whether it's with the director or a writer, I'll follow things to the letter. That's how I'll start out. I'm just gonna give you everything you asked for, bar none, unless I can't do it. And then it'll shake out in the really human process of rehearsal and previews. It'll shake out. But that was one that was very specific and it was very well written. And all I had to do was follow it, and it worked very well. And then you get into like Shakespeare plays, there's rarely any sound, if any, and so then you're just relying on the collaborative process. Sometimes somebody will want wind, but you maybe want to put a string quartet under it as well. I don't know if that helps, but
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I think we were here and then here.
I was wondering if you've been at this long enough to remember a time when there weren't wireless mics, and if you could talk about the transition, because that seems to be the major technical change of theater.
The first musicals to use wireless mics were actually amazingly back in the 60s. So I'm not that old. I mean, it's gotten bigger and bigger. When I started, like a 10 mic show was a big show, and now a 50 mic or a 60 mic show is a big show. Like I think I said it earlier, that it kind of, you have musicals that were written before that technology, and it's reflected in the way the music is written. But you look at something now like Blood Brothers or Sideshow or Spring Awakening, those shows are written with the full expectation that they can be a rock show and go over the top and everybody's mic'd. So it's, yeah, I remember it. I think it's also audience expectations have shifted so dramatically. We're not in a world anymore where people are used to getting in their car and hearing a mono speaker in the middle of the dash from their AM radio. My Ford Focus has a 10 speaker sound system in it, and that's like an economy car. You can buy surround sound systems in a Mercedes. What people have on their TV, so the expectations have shifted so dramatically. And as fun as they are on TV, shows like Smash and Glee have been tricky too, because they show all of this performance, but what you're hearing is really close mic studio recordings. And I've run into that now on a few productions where it's like, no, that's the sound I want. I'm like, well, that's someone in a studio on a close, I can't do that on stage. So it's this, that's the part that I've watched in my career. It's not necessarily the transition to wireless mics as much as the audience expectation on where sound is and directors and that, and it's a tricky road to navigate. Part of me wants to go, is that's what you want? Great, boom, we'll do it. But I love a subtly mic'd musical. I love one where it's Sunday in the Park with George, and what you're aiming for is everybody in the house can hear it. But that's really different than Spring Awakening, which, when the bitch of living breaks out in Spring Awakening, you better be able to shake the house. Because if you can't do that, the people stomping on the chairs better not be louder than my sound system. I mean, that's kind of, I think that's the world we're in now.
I think for me, early on, some of the first shows I did, it was a matter of budget, because most of the theaters, it was really expensive to have the wireless mics. So I remember they used to just put little floor mics at the edge of the stage and hope that would help. But what it ultimately did was pick up everybody walking around the stage. And
things sound really good when you're standing right there.
And another show that I did down for International City Theater when they were in their small space was Carole King's Tapestry years ago. And I asked them if they wanted to have handheld mics, and I said, can they be wireless? And they said, we can't afford those. And they learned really early on that was going to be a problem, because they choreographed the show with microphones in hand, and every now and then somebody would go the wrong way, and you would have a tangle of chords that nobody could get out of. And there would just be a big tangle of chords until intermission. and everything would have to, be pulled kind of, downstage because they couldn't go any further. And so, but I warned them, I said, we need to have wireless mics, meaning the handheld, and they said, no, we can't afford those, but the school or the university that they were based at, we have a whole bunch of these really wonderful corded mics, and that's the style of the 60s, which most of the show are in the early 70s, and they had a few performances that were kind of icky because the audience spent most of the time watching a big, huge, and it was a double layer set too, which made it worse. And they would go up the few steps, probably about as high as this is from the floor. You would have a big, huge blob of mic cords just like hovering in the middle of the stage. So, yeah, but it was more about budget early on than whether the technology was there. Most theaters here in LA really couldn't afford them for everybody.
Similar, real quick story is, I remember from doing all the music for there's a guy named Ken Rote in town who does a lot of staging, a lot of great stuff, but he did a whole bunch of 99-cent only holiday shows at the Evidence Room in the bootleg. And sometimes we'd have casts of like 40, but we'd only have 8 mics. So in addition to the regular traffic backstage, costumes, and Klaus Farley's all these plastic costumes, and people are taping and ripping and sweating and plastic, and they're slipping and they're running into. There's 8 mics for 40 people, and this person now we have a quartet over here and a solo over there. So there's a table back there with mics with this list of people. Mic 1 goes to these 9 characters.
But it's economically, that's where it goes. I mean, to buy a channel of high-end wireless, at the top end, $10,000 to $12,000 per channel. At the low end, $800 to $900. But I've worked on far too many shows and try to hang the whole show on those ones, and that never ends well. Rental-wise, the average in LA is about $100 a channel a week. So you imagine 20 mics on a musical, there's $2,000 a week just to rent the mics, not any other piece of the sound system. It gets expensive fast.
You want to make $1 trillion, be the person who invents a really inexpensive mic that never breaks. It's waterproof, whatever, what else do you think?
That sounds good.
Be that person, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, sir, and then one here and one here. Great.
I wanted to thank you very much for sort of explaining the complexities of modern sound. And going a little bit further on what the last gentleman said, what was musical theater like? You're probably all too young before where was augmented sound. And to sort of, because you already sort of somewhat touched on that, what about the fact that, I mean, you three are very competent people. I mean, I have great hearing and I go to plays and shows, and I mean, the sound engineer must be from a different world. So what is it like working with, you should say, you're very competent and the other members of your team, creative team, isn't?
Going to the first part, meaning
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah, prior to that.
Yeah, well, if you go to some of the opera houses in Europe, for instance, the way that they're built, the houses are close in, they go up higher, you see it tiered, but they're not generally very deep. I remember I never got a chance to visit because it was closed that day, but the opera house, Wagner's Opera House in Bayreuth, the pit for those huge orchestras that he had a pit built especially acoustically for his operas, so that he would have that huge sound, but I forgot the way the walls are made in the pit and how deep it is. It's made perfectly, so you can have those huge orchestras and still hear these Wagnerian singers.
But can we diverge to Broadway, say?
Well, that's what I mean, but even in New York houses, it's the same thing. If you go to the Schubert Theater in New York,
Right.
it's not a very deep house. It's not a very wide house,
Right.
proscenium-wise, and it goes, fairly high up. A lot of the old theaters that you see that are huge were old, kind of like vaudeville movie houses more than, Broadway theater houses, like the Fox Theater, which is in any of the Fox theaters, like the one in Atlanta specifically, or the one in Detroit, it's like 3,000 seats. It's a barn. I can't imagine doing something. It was built for movies, basically. I can't imagine doing a show in there without microphones.
It's also tricky. I think I work with a lot of schools, and I think there's you can do an intimate scene and still project.
True.
But I see so many that this is so I do not even musicals, but straight plays where I'm in row 2 in a 200-seat house, straining to hear someone on stage.
Right.
And the thing, like even when I do musicals, I don't care what size house it is. I just had this discussion with a performer this afternoon, where they were like, "Oh, am I too loud?" I'm like, "You will never be too loud for my system." The best thing you can do, the moment I put a mic on you, forget that it's there and perform like it's not there. And if you do that, I can make you sound great. But if you perform like you've got a boom mic in a film,
Television and film. Yeah.
I'm dead in the water. And in LA it's especially difficult because I do get a lot of, and the thing is, it's not just the performers. I work with a lot of directors that they'll go, "No, that's the way they're going to perform. That's the way I want the scene to be. It's your problem to figure that out." And I'm like, well, okay, but what it's going to be is an amplified whisper, and that's not what you're looking for. Because if someone's doing this, and I have to crank that up in a system, it's this really loud. That's not natural. You know, and it is. Again, I kind of do fall back to the audience expectation thing. I think if a modern audience saw a modern show with an Ethel Merman in it, they wouldn't quite know what to do with a voice that big. But it is. I struggle with it all the time. But how do you make that work? So that's the challenge. And you had a second part to your question.
Yes, the three of you are highly competent, but I'm sure, considering the sheer number of houses, playhouses in Los Angeles, that there's a great milieu of capability. So, have you ever been involved where the others are not up to the standard of which you are?
You do. The blunt version is there's a point that you hit where you say no to shows. And if I look at it and go, I can't do the work at the level that I think it needs to be at for these things, then I need to turn it down. So so it's kind of self-editing myself out of those. The other thing, when it comes to my own team, I insist that if you're going to hire me as a sound designer, I'm either bringing my engineer with me, or I'm going to tell you who you need to hire. Because that relationship is so critical that I have a short list of people that mix for me. And that's who I want on my shows. And if not, it better be like a 1-degree recommendation. And yeah, early in my career, I took anything I could get because I just needed the shows. Then you hit a point where if I look at it and go, there's a weak thing here, I don't want my name on that show, and so I really have to evaluate, like, well, is the check really going to be big enough for me to work on that?
And it's not always about bigger or smaller or more money or less money, because I think at least for me, the best work I've done has been in small 99-seat theater where I can make what they're paying me for the entire run of the show in a week doing something else. And there are bigger shows that you don't even want to touch because you know it's going to be a disaster. So yeah, I think for me the same thing at this point in my career, I kind of weigh out, is it a project I want to work on? Is the piece something I really like? And who are the other people involved in it? And so I'm lucky in that way, I've been able to avoid, now at this point in my career, some of those messier jobs.
And I give myself permission to do a couple of shows a year for either for free or for way under my rate, because for one reason or other, I like them. And you kind of have to do that. It's like I'm not going to take a check on this at all, and I'm going to donate the sound system, but I love it so much that I'm going to do it, and I let myself do a couple of those a year.
I find that you know, having for a long time been the incompetent one, early on in my career, and having no clue that I was the incompetent one, except once in a while when somebody would actually say something to me. That's what I find is pretty rare now. I think, I'm not sure if it's this way for everybody, but I think a lot of what happens in theater now is you never know who's going to be your boss next year. And so you don't say, hey, you have bad rep, or whatever it is, you know, or you can't sing, you know, or what you just don't know who your boss is going to be next year. So, but having been the incompetent one, you know, when I was in my teens and early 20s and didn't know it, I was very grateful for the people who said, I mean, I had a band leader one time threaten me, you know, physically. I was playing guitar, and he stopped the band in a rehearsal, and he walked up to me and he said, I probably can't be profane here. He just said, just play in time. Don't doodle around it, you know. I was scared to death. And, wow, that's like a college degree's worth of education right there. And so for me, when I run into somebody who really is struggling, and I guess I view people who are incompetent as people who are learning. Sometimes you get people who are incompetent, like I was incompetent, where I still knew it all. And those, like I was, were very difficult people to work with. You know, I can attest to that from reflecting on my early years. But if somebody is at all willing, or you can get them to see that willing is the way, then you have a unique opportunity in the midst of the chaotic show to help turn somebody into someone who is not going to be incompetent, who can in turn help somebody else. And that happens. And sometimes it's just really frustrating, you know, because we're all doing hyphenate things, and we're hoping that somebody can just do X while we're doing the rest of the alphabet. And when they can't, it's exhausting. But there's nice opportunities sometimes, if they're willing. You know.
The best advice I ever got was from someone. They told me, just remember, you're only as good as your last job. So
yeah, humility is it's an easier route.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't think I could walk into a theater in this country and not have someone somewhere in the building who I know. It might be a stagehand but you hit a point, this isn't a big industry. You know, so if you do something dumb, and like I said, the good advice that I had was be the type of person they want to have in the room. You can be brilliant at what you do, and if you're a jerk, they're going to hire you because they have to. You can be good at what you do, and if you're the kind of person they like to have in the room, they'll find a reason to bring you back.
Another question here, and then here, and then here and here. Start here.
Actually, I have two. I'll make it quick. How do you predict which are the dead seats in the house? And I'm thinking this would make a great downloadable private thing on the internet. It's like going to the seat map, you know, to select a seat. Oh, that one is bad. I mean, is there just a general rule of thumb on it?
If I had to go with an absolute rule of thumb, it'd be anything that's an extreme seat. If they've got extreme edge seats, you're running the risk that you're going to get a bad show. Extreme back seats or extreme front seats, because what you're doing, the main sound system is going to be focused to cover the bulk of the seats. And if you've got a lot of money and you're throwing things at it, like in a big house, you'll have a main system that's covering out there, and then front fills that are in place just to pick up the first couple of rows. And you may have side fills that come in. Well, guess what happens when the budget starts to get cut? Well, we'll start cutting these side fills, and then the front fills will go away. And then, but they're really, and the thing is, you could go into the same theater for 2 different shows 2 months apart from each other, and if there's 2 different sound designers who hung 2 different systems, those seats will change. Now they're going, there's a few houses that I know, like, oh, that's a bad seat, they are everything, and it's because what it would take is hanging an extra system to cover 3 seats, and just nobody's gonna pay for that. Like the way this house is shaped, it's pretty easy to cover the whole thing. But like if these two long rows went out 3 more seats, I'd worry about those last ones because they're out of the main pocket of the house and it's gonna be an extra system to reach out to that corner. Because what you're trying to do is put sound on the seats and keep it off the walls. So the closer it gets out there, because when I get splash off the walls, to get technical, it's comb filtering. So my voice hitting you takes a certain amount of time. That same sound hitting the wall, then coming to you, takes a different amount of time. The more of those reflections that you get, the harder it is to get intelligibility. So I'm trying to keep the sound system pointed where it's not gonna hit the walls. So you get things into extremes and you get all kinds of issues with that.
Great. And your follow-up?
And the second thing, I read that the cell phone companies, everybody with a voracious appetite, everybody has to have a device, they're running out of that prime bandwidth. And they want to take the theater, the church, and the stadium, bandwidth and use it.
Well, they already have.
Can you talk about the legislation on that?
Well, it's white space is going on. We've already lost part of it. The 700 megahertz spectrum got sold. That's gone. There's a limited number of mics you can fit in. Basically what it is in any given area, you've got the TV stations, and the big thing that killed us is digital TV. Because where a TV station used to take out a chunk this big, a digital TV station takes out a chunk this big. And if there's a digital TV station broadcasting, we can't use those frequencies, they're off the map. Cities like LA and New York are nightmares. It's very difficult to do frequency coordination, and being good at just that piece of the puzzle is a big thing. I also rent wireless systems, so I have to deal with that all the time. There's a push with digital systems to cram more mics into a smaller bandwidth, and it's really technical things with frequency hopping and stuff that's going on with that. The problem that happens there is something called latency. So to put something into that system and get it back out, it takes a certain amount of time. The window of opportunity that we have for the human ear is about 40 milliseconds. If 2 sounds arrive within 40 milliseconds of each other, our brain will merge them together into one sound. Outside of 40 milliseconds, you start to get into problems. Every time you convert something from analog to digital and back again, you add latency. The digital systems are the ones that can do this, but the best digital mic systems right now, just putting that mic in the system adds about 3.6 milliseconds of latency. Then you add the digital mixer, then you add all of these other things, and it's easy before you do any kind of alignment to your system to already have 20 milliseconds of delay. So now instead of 40 milliseconds to work with, I'm down to 20. And the reason that's important, on big houses, the way I get the sound to sound like it's heading from the stage is using delay. We localize where sound comes from more based on when it arrives than how loud it arrives. So I can have a system that arrives slightly after the acoustic sound from stage and run it significantly louder, and you'll think it's coming from stage. So this delay and everything else, there's systems that can combat it, but we're starting to run out of room, and it's tricky. There's some new systems out there that can cram 60 channels in where we used to cram 20, but it's a lot of management, and I've done things outside on plazas where I'm fighting to get 10 channels working.
And you mentioned the advocacy piece of it on the legislation. I would advise you to look at California Arts Advocates when any sort of legislation that comes up around sort of arts and creative economy, they're usually on it. So California Arts Advocates would be the best place to.
The reality is, unfortunately, if you get every single thing together, including little events like the Super Bowl involved, we're 1/10 of 1% of what the cell phone industry is. There's no amount of advocacy that's going to win it. It's going to be a technical solution. Or the first time a Super Bowl halftime show doesn't happen because they lose their frequencies. And then you'll see something happen. And I hate to be really negative about it, but the economics of it are so huge that, like, you add in every broadcaster and every sporting event, they're all fighting the same fight, and we're still, and you think how big sports are in the US, and we can't get this to budge.
So pretty soon, we're just gonna start singing without mics again.
I firmly believe there will be a technical solution that these things with latency and cramming things in and frequency hopping, we're getting closer and closer, and the reality is the company that solves it is gonna own the wireless market for a long time. So there's a big cash prize at the end of it. It'll get solved. And right now we're limping through and doing okay. But that's the hard economics about it. Or a Super Bowl goes down and that's when a senator goes, well, I gotta have my Super Bowl. Boom, and there'll be legislation the next day.
I had 3 queued up. I had here, there was one here, and it was here. So let's hear all 3 of them, and then we'll give the responses that we can. So first.
I have a question, but you were talking about confidence, and I thought about the 4 stages of confidence. You heard about, you start out being unconsciously incompetent, then you become consciously incompetent, so you work at it, and then you become consciously confident until you become so good that you're unconsciously confident.
Yeah, that's when you're out of the way of the art.
Well, you're
That's
so
right.
good that you don't have to think about it because you worked at going through those other stages. So what I was thinking about, though, as you were talking is, what kind of training have you got? You seem so knowledgeable on so many levels since your job involves so many different aspects. Just wondered what your training is, and I think of the little boys who want to be doctors, lawyers, or firemen, or policemen. When you were little, had you thought about going into sound?
So first question will be about training. Great.
Just thinking about audio in particular, it's such an ephemeral thing. How do you, when you're working on a show, you can design the whole sound and work in the space. But in terms of documentation of it, the lighting and costumes, we can all record that. But audio-wise, it will vary by the amount of people in the audience, the temperature, everything else. How do you get your stage manager and or A1 to know the sound space? How do you describe that in a tangible way that can be referred to later, and especially something that's, say, touring, where they're going to have a different venue every night? How do you sort of describe it in a way that they can understand and will keep your design consistent?
Great, so documentation and sort of reference materials. And our last?
Yeah, hi. I'm a composer and orchestrator, and I'm probably this question is mostly directed to Darryl, but I think it is a question for all of you about the collaborative process. And who serves who, and what do you do when you feel like there's just too many cooks, and there's got to be some kind of hierarchy to the madness. And I've been in some pretty desperate situations, to say the least, and I'm having a trouble negotiating, being on both sides as a composer and knowing I have to also bow to the wisdom of other people. Who is ultimately being served here? Whose interests in the collaborative process trump, for lack of a better word? I mean, because it can be a nightmare, and you're banning composers from theaters the next thing you know, and it shouldn't amount to that, right? So I know that example was an extreme case of a nutcase. But I guess the question is clear. Right?
Great, so who trumps? So we'll start with a speed round of training, background.
I grew up in the church and was just very interested in all of those hymns. I tried to sing all the parts. I went on to music school. I went to the Musicians Institute in Hollywood as a guitar player. My career for many, many years was just as a performer. I'm an alumnus of Cal Arts with a music composition degree. The rest of my training is from the School of Hard Knocks.
I graduated from USC, actually with a major in flute performance, but I also did conducting institutes like with Herbert Blumstedt, things like that. So I started in classical music and ended up in musical theater.
I've done theater in some form since I was about 5. I have a bachelor's degree in performance and a master's degree in theatrical sound design, partly from Cal Arts and partly from the University of Cincinnati. And then computers and technology have been my hobby since I was this tall. And the reality is that happened to converge at just the right point when sound really made that push into, if you're doing sound in present day in theater, you're also an IT person. You kind of have to be. And I happened to hit that. I've never had any formal training in programming or anything, but it's been my hobby from when I was a kid. And that just lined up perfectly for me. But I have a master's degree in sound design. So.
Great, so then our second was about the documentation and reference materials and articulating what you're hoping for as a show continues on.
I would answer that quickly from the musical theater standpoint, or as a copyist, a music copyist, make it as specific as you can. You know, other than that, my answer is, man, I don't know. The next show is going to be different.
And having just been on the road with a tour for 2 years, every house is different, and every house did not sound good. And I don't think what the sound designer intended when you originally did the show was for it to go to every theater in the country. They usually design it for the space that it's originally in, say, on Broadway. And you just hope when you get to, and some theaters just have bad sound. I mean, we carried our own stuff, but some configurations were, I mean, the houses, they echoed. Other houses, it all sounded like mush. Some houses were crisp. So you were at the mercy a lot of times of the actual theater you were in.
It's a combination of a few things. For one, it's when I'm working with people, doing everything I can do to establish a common vocabulary, so that when I'm talking in abstract terms, they have a baseline of when I say dark, this is what I mean by dark. You've heard the same thing I do. It also comes down to the way I hire. If I'm going to be doing a musical, part of the reason I want my hand in hiring control of the engineer is because that's the person that I need to know I can trust. Okay, we've established this the way it sounds. This sound right here, opening night, is the goal you're aiming for. Or if I need to walk away from opening night and it's not quite there, these are the 10 things you're trying to tune in. And then there are some objective tools you can use. I mean, if it's things like sound pressure level, that you can empirically measure how loud things are at certain points in the house. And so I can say, look, this is what I'm aiming for. And if a producer's coming through and pushing you to get louder and louder and louder, I'm sorry, 110 dB at the back row is too much. And I wish that was a joke. I have metered a show at 122 dB at the back row. And have been told this isn't loud enough. Because louder is more exciting. Keep in mind, I also do some theme park work. So there you go.
That's a perfect segue to our final question, which is who trumps?
Producer.
At some level, who's writing the checks? I mean, as much as you hate to say it. Inside the team, hopefully what you're establishing is a dialogue. I personally try very hard never to be in a position where I have to say, out of the pool. But that's also wisdom that's come with later years. When I was a younger designer, I was looking for it. Damn it, no, my job is to answer this question. And I did do the things like, no, the band just needs to play quieter. And now I look at it and go, oh, no, I get it. When I ask the band to play quieter, I'm really hurting the performance. Oops. So hopefully with a little bit of age and maturity, that it comes down to it. I can't think of a show recently where it had to be a fiat of the sound designer has final say. It may be myself and the music director and someone else standing in front of the producer and the director saying, all right, here's what we're bringing to the table. And, you know, they want this, I want this, and both of them can't happen, so you need to tell us which is more important. And then from there, it could be either one. It could be them saying, no, this is more, okay, great. And if I'm told that, you know, something's somewhat perfect, you know, we've got someone on stage that's a named person and they have to hear themselves as loud as they possibly can, or they're going to walk off the show. Okay, great, that's what they'll get on stage. Done.
Darryl?
And going back to the collaboration between the composer and the musical director, you want to have that trust, like I would have with the sound team, the sound designer, that you can trust your music to be interpreted by someone else. Where you run into problems is when you have a composer who doesn't want to let it go. Like a writer who doesn't want to trust a director to take the show to the next level and take the vision to the next level. So if you don't trust your musical director or you don't get along with your musical director, then you should probably find another musical director. But you need to find someone, not a yes person. You need to find someone who you believe will take what you've created and, interpret it and, do the best with what you've presented them. But it's also willing to let it go.
And to wrap this up, I try to close all of these with one question for each of our panelists. In a few words, what's your one wish for LA theater?
That there was more of it.
What? We couldn't hear it.
That there was more of it.
Oh.
I want to see more producing mid-size houses.
Amen.
I love doing the 99-seaters, but when you look at the size of LA and the number of theaters and the fact that it's all this at one level, and then a tiny little slice in the middle of, I want more theaters between 200 and 500 seats.
Yeah, I would agree that having more of it would be better. And also getting people to be able to get there. Unfortunately, we live in a city that is choked with traffic. And you're gonna come home from work, working really hard all day, grab some dinner, and then get back in your car and drive half an hour or 45 minutes somewhere,
Or 2 hours.
and take 2 hours, and take 20 minutes to find a parking spot, and then get your exercise by walking 10 minutes to the theater. People aren't going to do that. So public transportation is what we do for theater in LA.
So please take public transportation to our next LA Stage Talk, which is August 6th at 7, where we are going to have a number of choreographers and dancers talking about their process across forms. I want to thank you for your giving up your time. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their stories, and I want to thank the Geffen for hosting us.